Hey there, I'm Pete Townsend, and this is Money Never Sleeps. We look inside the minds of entrepreneurs and at the crossover of startups, enterprise, finance, technology, and life as we know it. On the show this week, we've got Colm Lyon.
Hi, I'm Colm Lyon, the CEO and founder of Fire.com.
Sharing his story as an Irish Fintech OG, bootstrapping and scaling his first Fintech RealX before it was even called Fintech, building a great culture as an Irish company competing globally, how successful exits aren't really exits. Then we go right up to his leadership role today as founder and CEO of Fire.com and what excites him about what Fintech will become. All right here on Money Never Sleeps. Colm, just to get started, I might have said hello to you at the first Fintech and Payments Association of Ireland conference in 2016. That got my mind into Fintech quite a bit. And then you and I met a few times over the years. Had lunch, I think, in the basement of the Marion Hotel.
That's right.
And stayed in touch, but never actually got to have this conversation with you and immortalize it for all of time ahead of us. So thank you so much for joining today. Really appreciate it.
No, it's great to be here, Pete. Thank you for having me on.
Awesome. Just to get started, do you want to walk us through your backstory and how you got to this point in your life?
Yeah, sure. I'm probably an old man at this stage for many of your listeners. So I'm in my late 50s now at this stage. So it's been a long career, and most of that career has been spent in financial services and specifically in the area of payments, which would be the specialist topic in which I've worked for most of my career. I did start off back in the 1980s when things were a little different to what they are now. I spent the first part of my career working in Ulster Bank in what was called back in the days a business analyst. So it was very much about joining and not so much being a technician, but being a technologist that would understand and appreciate the setup of operations and processes, and would have been involved in many of the digitization of core banking services. And so I was fortunate in that I got to work in a whole range of different areas of the bank at the time, the treasury, the capital markets, also invoice financing. And I worked there for, I think it was 14 years.
Was that always in technology, Colm, or was it part of operations, part of front facing?
It was mostly, I think the IT functions was interesting in that IT at the time, like there was only one mainframe in the bank when I joined, right? And a handful of dumb screens, right? And there was no network, there was no email, so you can imagine it was a very, very different world. It's hard to believe that that's what it was like back then. And I remember having even to work on the business case for bringing email into the organization. There were really interesting kind of changes that came about, and work practices dramatically changed. And so IT and the role that I played was about not so much the technicalities of programming, say, or designing networks, but more about the implication on the business process of implementing this new technology. Yeah, and
that makes sense because there was no quarterly releases or daily releases or anything back then, and there were no networks, right? It was.
I remember having to evaluate the benefits of tokening over which network would have been a more appropriate network to deploy in your organization.
Wow.
And that was that's when back in the day people would have, they wouldn't just buy a router or a switch. They'd actually decide which type of routing network and topology did you want to bring into your organization. It was fascinating, obviously, but
yeah, I in thinking about this chat this morning, Colm, I was out for a walk, and I'm listening to the founder of Polygon, which is a layer 2 blockchain solution, talk about his business formation, and I'm thinking to myself that in 10 years or 15 years from now, we'll be thinking about layer 2 blockchains is just another piece of infrastructure, just like we're thinking about Ethernet cables going back to the 1980s or 90s, just because it will become so embedded into the fabric of business, right?
You're right. And the thing back then, you had to piece together all the components yourself as the architect of the solution, which is what I would have been, to bring in this accessibility, to bring in the automation. It might have been simple things like even word processing at the time, which we all just take for granted today, right? But back then, these were fundamental changes to the way in which the organization worked. And we went right down to the level of evaluating the cables that you would put into your comms room and at the desk. And it was right down to that level of detail, because you had choice at every step along the way. And you had to make sure then that all the choices that you made in the overall design of your network and your solution was one that would work, and deliver basically the benefits. People say that change is accelerating. In many ways, it's not. Like, it's just the same, because the change back then was really dramatic. It was really deep, and it was fundamental to the way in which businesses worked. The introduction of that early stage desktop computing fundamentally changed the way organizations worked, and it was completely different. And I don't think we ever, we didn't see really the depth of that change that was ahead of us, until we got into the journey as an industry. And the 14 years I spent there were great, because in a role like that, you don't understand just the technology and how the technology works, and you don't just have that responsibility, but you're also trying to understand the implication of the adoption of this technology on your business. So you're trying to see, how will things change? How will the trades and the treasury room work when I can, feed information back to the traders in a more timely way? How does it work when the traders are able to create their own technology at the desk to be able to identify an arbitrage situation faster than the competition now, because we've given them this technology? How is it that the system can now tell us that the collateral that's maybe due on a revolving credit for a loan, that some of the documentation needs to be refreshed, because that was all manually maintained. But now we can lend more money. We can lend more money to more people more quickly, more easily, and we can control that as well. So it was, it really was fundamental. And I think what I learned most from those 14 years was the appreciation of the impact that technology has on the business processes, and trying to work out how business processes would change, as a result of that adoption of technology.
Yeah, sounds like some of the early schools of thought of jobs to be done. What is it that we're trying to do in a workplace? What are we trying to do for the customer, right? And then how do we build the technology to support that, or structure or position the technology? If it's not being developed in-house, structure and position that so that it can do the job that the customer needs it to do, and for the people that are using that technology in-house as well. It's pretty cool.
I think there was a second aspect to it, which is interesting, which I found, which was something that I see come back to me today, and I think about quite a bit, was the ability as well. It's one thing to recognize the change that's coming and the change in the way in which things work, but can you also project manage that change as well in an effective way? And one of the good things back then was that there were very strong methodologies for project management and for program management and for implementing change. And they were new at the time, but there were very, very structured ways by which you went about making change. And I think that was the second kind of, I think that as I move into the Relex, I found that many of the things that I had learned, and the things I learned about managing change and about how to be effective at managing change, were really useful to me later on than when Relex came about.
Absolutely. And tell us, what was the inspiration to launch Relex in the year 2000?
I had been toying with the idea of trying to set up my own business for some time, and there was never any one particular initiative that I was thinking about which would have pushed me over the full way to make the decision to leave, because I was 38 at the time, and I remember trying to work out, is it too late? And I got involved in a project that was supporting a business that was selling online. Those back in the day, businesses, when they were selling online, I think that the solution that many banks were providing was they'd send them a card machine out in the post, and they'd connect up the card machine, and they'd phone the customer, get the details over the phone, and type them into the machine. And they realized that this wasn't going to work or scale, and that a web-based version of this was required. And what did the web-based version of the terminal look like? And I think what happened was I became, I think, satisfied that to get into that space would be a really good space to be in. We had the millennium bug, if you like, had just finished. So, which meant that for many people in the IT financial services sector, there was a thing called the millennium bonus, which meant that in March 2000, we all got lump sums basically that had kept us in the bank up until that point in time.
Because you kept the systems alive.
Exactly. And we had the euro changeover in 1999, and we had the millennium in 2000. So there was a lot of retention packages that were quite common at the time. And so for me, then the lump sum was the trigger that really gave me the buffer to be able to take this step.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And then tell me about the launch of Relex, and then you had a 15-year run with that before exiting, yeah?
That's right. It's back in 2000 then. So For the first year or so, I was on my own, and I was trying to, if you like what I had done before, I guess, where you're given a blank page and you're asked to implement, in the previous times I had implemented asset leasing systems, treasury systems, lending systems, whatever. And here I'm implementing a payment system. So I was able to use the same skills and techniques and draw together the infrastructure right down to the servers that we would need, the software that we would need. And I was fortunate to be able to go to people in the industry with whom I would have had, good business relations. And I was able to get great help and great support from people to get the initial version up and running. And then my co-founder, Owen Byrne, he joined in January, I think it was 2001. And I acted as the business analyst, if you like, and then Owen did the coding. And we were able to get our first client live in March 2001, which was Direct Ski, which is an Irish-based, they're still there, still doing really well, ski holiday retailer. And what we did was, the proposition was really just, enable businesses to sell online by helping them to process their payments into their bank, their acquiring bank or their merchant services provider. So that way we were a technical switch, basically, that set between the retailers and the banks. We made it easy for the retailers because we were able to give them an API that meant that they could, accept payments on their website. And then we made it easy for the banks because the banks didn't have to deal with thousands and thousands of small retailers and explain to them how to do all this. But they just dealt with us and we had the pipe into them.
Okay. So you did the website APIs as well as the gateway to the merchant acquiring.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, which is when you talk about having the problems of, a bank sending you out a debit card or card machine, right? If you're selling online, that what immediately comes to mind is Stripe, right? And 8 lines of code that they wrote.
Yeah.
But all that they really supported in that value chain, they're doing a lot more today. But the first incantation of that was just the website APIs.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you still needed that payment gateway into the merchant acquiring bank in order to get those card payments through. I know a little bit too much about the card payment infrastructure from a project I worked on a couple of years ago. So, but not as much as you do. So
yeah, it's a fascinating industry, and it's an industry that where you can be a very smart provider in several different steps along the chain or the process. And because it's so big, you can build yourself a very large and respectable business in a very niche area in payments. And that's the beauty of the payments industry. And I can remember when we were in late 2001, we were sitting in Arthur Cox's office, who had been really helpful to us in terms of helping us to get set up, but also in terms of just the brand association. We were making a pitch to some investors. And Owen had prepared a screen which showed transactions as they were occurring through our gateway into the different acquiring banks for 19 or 20 merchants that we had live at that stage. And when we were pitching to the investors, I inadvertently just flicked onto that screen, and I left the screen behind me on the overhead while I was presenting and talking about the business. And one of the people in the room asked me what was going on, and they could see transactions going through in real time. And I said to them, well, we've a client in the States who provides services into, I think it was a baseball game going on at the time. And they're obviously selling, either services in relation to that game or pay-per-view or something. I said, I'm not 100% sure. But the guy turned around to me and said, so you're processing payments because there's a baseball game happening in the US right now? And I kind of said, yeah, well, that's what we do. And I never thought about the profound nature of the fact that as an Indigenous Irish business with 2 people working in it in Dublin, we were participating in a value chain that was happening in the US at that moment in time.
That's awesome.
And you kind of then you realize that's actually what we can do, And then over the years we just built it all up. We ended up getting people like Aer Lingus. On the back of Aer Lingus, we got Virgin Atlantic, and we processed the global business for Virgin Atlantic worldwide from both their call centers and their websites all over the world, and we routed their transactions into multiple acquiring banks. We did the same for Paddy Power for the AA insurance in the UK. We had some incredible clients, and as you know, it built up over 15 years to something like 12,500 clients for whom we were processing 30 billion euro worth of payments per annum. So it was a very large and important piece of infrastructure that was at one stage probably one of the biggest, if not the biggest, e-commerce gateway in Europe from a value processing perspective. We were processing into AIB Merchant Services, the first data group quite extensively into HSBC Global Payments as well. And so a host of different acquiring banks, Barclaycard, WorldPay. And again, we were independent of those banks. Then we got the opportunity to white label. Our infrastructure was white labeled by Global Payments in the UK, by Santander in Spain, and by Elevon. And it became, that the distribution then became both direct and indirect, which saw us like scale at very attractive rates in the around 2012, 2013, 14 and 15, and our clients that we had as well continued to grow as they were selling more online, motor tax. I mean, you can understand that, why would anybody ever go into the motor tax office again when you could do it online? Why would, and the same with the likes of Aer Lingus, who maybe had 5 or 10% of their traffic online when they signed up with Relex. But, a couple of years later, that was 60, 70, and then in the 90s now, So as our customers grew, we grew, and then we got more customers, and then we found more distribution as well through the indirect partnerships that we had. And we ended up with 170 people, and it was, I have to say, it was a really wonderful experience and a great time. And I come across many of the people that worked in Relex now quite a lot, and they're working in different payment companies, and everybody has this great shared fondness for the years when we grew that business. So it was all grown organically. Like, we had no VC, we had no private equity involved.
Nice.
Aside from the original investors, of which there was about 15, I think, who invested €320,000 into the business. That was the only external capital that we raised at the time, throughout the journey.
And if I were to run into one of the folks that worked with you for those 15 years, and I asked them about the experience, what would they say?
I think they'd probably say that it was really great crack as well. And I think the two things probably that people say would be that they learned an awful lot. That they learned a huge amount about, their business, payments, selling strategy. It was a very open environment. Like, we had with the Relex Academy, which was how we used to help people with their learning and development. And we were very much strategy led. We called our strategy F5, which is the refresh key on the browser. And we went through F5 and then F5.1 and F5.2. And people still talk about
Nice.
F5, on the strategy. We used to have offsites quite a lot. We'd have a lot of exercises that we would do together. We would always looking for better ways, not necessarily faster ways, but just better ways of doing things, ways to go to market. We built, the theme of the office was quite interesting in that we built it based on the Burn in County Clare. And so we had ring forts built in the office, Cahardún Ergus, which are favourite spots of mine. And we built Craggy Island and Mrs. Doyle's Kitchen, and we
Shout out to Father
indeed,
Ted.
and we had O'Connor's Pub in Doolin, and we recreated part of that within the office in Dublin and in London as well. And so when you went into the Dublin office, you got that sense of being an Indigenous Irish business. We were, not like, and I'm nothing against them, but we were not a multinational. Like, we were an Indigenous Irish business, and we were processing payments for retailers all over the world to their banks all over the world,
Wow. I didn't know that about the business Colm, because my formative years in Ireland in the year 1994, I spent a lot of time in the Burn.
Oh, very good.
I was doing some rock climbing, and we'd go from Galway on a Friday night, drive down, stay in a hostel in Doolin, and then climb along the sea cliffs, not the Cliffs of Moher, but the shorter ones a little bit north of the Cliffs of Moher on Saturdays. It was an awesome experience. So that's pretty cool. You had that theme about the whole office.
Yeah, and I know we're digressing slightly, but the Burn is considered to be a place of learning, and has always been a place of learning. And sometimes it's place-based location learning, like that is a really important concept. And people can go to the Burn, and they still go. I have done programs in the Burn, the College of Art down there, and the Art of Conversation and Leadership. And, it is, and there's people down there who really firmly believe that the multiplicity of multi-generations of people who've been there, that learning has been a huge part of it. And so the learning, and we like that theme and we like that idea. And we were always within Relex as well. It was always very much about learning and about the development of people through the process of learning. And I think, the evidence is there that when I look at the people that went through that journey with me over the many years, and when you see the roles that they're in now, They're in very, very senior positions in a multiplicity of different payment companies, both in Dublin and globally across the world. And it's a wonderful thing when we come across them in our business today. And you kind of, and as I said, they look back, with just, and they think about Relax. They often talk about, like, I learned so much there, because sometimes people in their jobs, they don't learn. And I think that's an awful shame, because they're just doing what they already know and what they need to do, but they don't learn new stuff. And I think that's one of the things that we found was that people love that idea of learning.
Absolutely. What is it that you think you learned about the exit to global payments with RealX in 2015?
I guess that it wasn't an intentional outcome from the process that we went into at the time. And we met up, the group of kind of executive shareholders, if you like. We met up when we were presented we had 4 or 5 different options on the table. And we talked about the idea of raising capital to continue as an independent firm. We talked about joining a larger financial institution and becoming an important part of that. And I think for me, the key was that no matter what I wanted at that stage, what everybody else wanted was the way that we needed to go. And there was a completely unanimous decision that the team would prefer to be part of a larger, financial institution that would give us the distribution. Okay. And the exit is only the exit. If people call it an exit, right? But it's an exit only for the shareholders.
Yeah, exactly.
For everybody else, it has to be an opportunity to continue to grow and to scale and the entity itself and the business itself. You might be exiting, but what you've got to make sure of is that what you're handing over, if you like, has to be something that's going to continue to grow. And that's what we saw with the opportunity with Global Payments, was that Global Payments, they wanted a gateway, they wanted the technology, but more importantly, I think what they wanted was the team. They wanted the people, the expertise and the talent. And the expertise and the people have done it remarkably well. And many of the guys now have roles that are group wide within Global Payments. And I know Global Payments, they're a fantastic organization. And for them, this was strategically something that was very important in terms of the overall, strategy that they were pursuing at the time. And so it became a really, really good fit. And for me, you got to learn which decisions you're in control of and which ones you're not really in control of. You just got to be able to direct that decision the right way and towards the right partnership. And certainly for me, it was an absolute fantastic partnership, and they were exceptional to deal with as well,
Yeah, and I can hear that the term exit would be the last word in your vocabulary when you're thinking about this yourself, and that with what you grew and what you nurtured and the culture and the team and the business that you built and that the team built together, that it's not an exit, it's a transformation.
The feeling that I experienced at the end, at that time, would have been one of enormous relief. It's a massive lifting of a huge responsibility and a huge, I wouldn't call it, maybe it's a stress or strain, I don't know, but it's just your thinking is consumed by the business, and you see, businesses are everybody in it, 170 people within it. It's 12,000 customers. It's their millions of customers that they have. It's the 2 million transactions a day that we were processing at the time, the 28 billion a year. You're thinking, like, all these things have to stay going and have to work and have to be harmonized, and more importantly, they have to be aligned so that there's nothing kind of in your organization that's pulling it apart. And that alignment becomes your responsibility as the CEO. And alignment, and making sure that alignment exists within your organizations and all the different parts of it at all times, is a very demanding job, I feel. And what happened to me was, when we did sell, and I wasn't involved post the sale date, so I got this enormous sense of relief, and it was very welcomed sense of, this is fantastic, because now somebody good and somebody nearly better than me has actually come in and has taken over this responsibility to ensure that this organization and all of its people, aspects and customers is going to continue on its journey. And I felt a massive, massive sense of relief when that happened.
Yeah. It sounds like, two things building there. One, this bridge for the Realize business into global payments and for all the customers to go over that bridge. But at the same time, you're building a bit of headspace for yourself.
Yeah. And that, that, I suppose it's a responsibility that you have, as the CEO of a company of that scale. That's a very, very important one. And you have to take it seriously, and you have to make sure that that in a situation like that, when there is a sale like that, that it is a sale that looks after all the stakeholders and not just yourself.
Yeah. But then you win again with
Yes.
Fire.
Yes.
Fire.com.
Yeah.
Tell us, it seemed like you can't keep a good man down.
Well, before the sale with Relex, we had started Fire, and
yes,
there was the opportunity.
There was the overlap there.
Yeah. And there was an opportunity for us to look at it. And I acquired it then as part of the sale of Relex. And I was very keen to do so, primarily around the changes which I feel are inevitable in the area of payments. And it's driven largely by, businesses are becoming more and more and more digital all the time. And they need to have accounts and payment solutions that are digital in their design. And unfortunately, for many large financial institutions, the legacy accounts that businesses are provided with are kind of like, it's like when I logged into my bank recently, they had put my previous transactions into PDFs, which I can't search anymore.
Wow. Yeah, I know.
And I was thinking, why did you do that? Because that makes it really hard for me now to find, a transaction from 6 months or 2 years ago, like that I need to find. And and what I'm seeing in my online banking is kind of what I saw on my statement like 20 years ago when I worked in the bank. It hasn't really changed that much. And yet business has changed enormously. And so what we were really interested in doing was seeing how could we make the digital account. And a digital account would be something that would be digital by its design. So an account that is, API accessible, API first, that has this connectivity and this accessibility to it, which a regular bank account wouldn't have. And in tandem with that, the other, if you like, major change and major wave that I think is occurring is that people will have, in the area of payment, into the future, they're going to have direct access to their account to make payments. And they won't necessarily be using the card. Yeah. And that it is, technology has advanced to the point now where we all have our multiple accounts on our phone, and we can access those accounts through our devices. And what we're seeing at this stage is, the early versions of what I call account-to-account based payments, which is where people are paying from their accounts now. And we're seeing early stages of that starting, particularly in Ireland and the UK. But we're seeing that being previously a very dominant form of payment on the continent in Europe, right, where people have been paying from their accounts. But they've tended to be quite nationalized, those solutions, and low, if you like. And a lot of them. I certainly believe that into the future, just as you tap your card today on an NFC tag somewhere and you do a contactless payment, there's no reason why you won't, tap your phone and the money will just go directly from your account if it's under 50 quid, and it will go straight to the account of the retailer in which you are. And that money will go in real time to that retailer, and it will be instant. And the cost of processing it will be a fraction of what it costs today. And I think that this is where the world is headed. And so what we wanted to make was that to get involved in that, what we call the acquiring of account-based payments, so making it easy for businesses to get paid directly from people's accounts. To get involved in that, what you need at the core of it is a digital account. You need an account into which these transactions will flow. And you need that because you need to be able to, first of all, you need to be able to collect that money in a way that you can also bring more data with you, perhaps, than that which a regular bank account would allow for. So you need to be able to collect data, you need to be able to reconcile, and then you need to be able to settle the funds on a batch basis into the corporate bank account of the retailer, whatever that might be. There's a whole load of services there that I feel that we can develop. And so what we've been doing is we've been building infrastructure basically that is allowing us to bring a digital account to market. And that digital account then supports a whole range of different payment services, be it faster payments, be it open banking payments, account-to-account based payments. We also became an issuer in MasterCard, so we can now issue MasterCard off the account as well. Our business clients then can have any number of accounts and any number of cards that they need. And so you're thinking about like business models today, like marketplaces and alternative lenders, invoice discounting firms. When they go to a regular bank to get the services that they need, there's constraints in the way. There's processes are not really aligned with those business models. While with Fire, we're able to let them open up accounts, in real time through the API. Our accounts are fully clearing interoperable. They can order any number of debit cards that they need. They can use the API to change which debit cards are linked to what accounts. And so that gives us the ability to be able to support business models that non-digital accounts couldn't really support. And so we've ended up with a really nice array of customers, which is a good thing and a bad thing, because it's a great thing in that we can solve problems for lots of different companies. It can be perceived sometimes as a difficult thing because it perhaps it suggests that that we need to focus more maybe on certain segments, which is an interesting kind of discussion.
Yeah, it is, and it's like when you have built a truly digital platform, the composability of that platform is so much more wide ranging than what you might have found 15 years ago, right?
Absolutely.
So you can do a lot of different things, and as long as you can manage that and you can control it, try those different things,
Yeah.
right? And because you never know which new product feature will open up some brand new revenue channels that you hadn't been really monetizing that much of before. So go for it, right?
No, I think that's really, really smart. And I think of some of our clients, like in Ireland and the UK, we have Buy Me as a client. And Buy Me, Devin Hughes' company, is a fantastic organization that does the personal shopping for people. And all the personal shoppers within Buy Me carry Fire debit cards. And what we're able to do is to give the guys the ability through the API to decide when and where and how those cards should be used. So those cards can be permanently disabled. And then it's only at the point of sale, are the cards enabled. And then when authorizations go through, we're able to use our webhook to tell them that this card's just been authorized so they can disable it again. And then we picked up clients in the alternative finance sector, great customers like Great Finance, Accelerated Payments, Market Fair, Invoice Fair, Flender. And they're all clients of ours that sit on the Fire platform so that they can manage the flow of money through a multiplicity of accounts. And they can automate processes and automate the services that they provide to their customers. And then during lockdown, we were very fortunate. We won two significant pieces of business. So we've got a very large card acquirer based in Europe for whom we're now doing the daily settlement of the money, their sterling payments to their UK-based retailers. So we are, it's a large European-based card acquirer. And obviously you can appreciate the volumes would be, but they have tens of thousands of retailers in the UK. And what we do for them is through Fire, we're able to take their lodgement every day. And then from their host system, we're able to receive all the instructions as to how to disperse that money. And we can do so within a few minutes. And so it gives us that ability to give them a service that they're able to say to their retailers now, when their retailers, sell on a Monday, they get paid on a Tuesday morning. And then we also won a significant contract with a very large UK bank who wants to bring account-based payments to their customer base. So it's a large, they've literally hundreds of thousands of retailers for whom they currently allow them to get paid via card payments. And what they want to be able to do is to enable those retailers then to accept payments using account-based payments, open banking payments to be specific. And we were regulated as a payment initiation service provider for open banking. And we're also an e-money institution in the UK, which meant that we were able to provide the service. And so that's, again, we're really thrilled with that because, as a 30-person Irish business, winning the contracts to provide, some of the world's biggest financial institutions with key pieces of infrastructure that enables them to go to market with really innovative services and innovative solutions for their customers is I love that. Like, that's really, that's worth getting up in the morning for, right? It's really, really enjoyable, to be able to. I'm not saying it's easy, but but it's good.
Yeah, no, it's that challenge that you want to face every day. And I've been a happy customer, Colm, as you know, of Fire for a few years now. And I started off with one option of a digital bank that has 1 million customers now in Ireland. When they open up their business account, I had an unfortunate experience with them, and I had the Fire account beforehand. And after one transaction with that digital bank that shall not be named, I came right back to Fire. And I've been with you guys ever since. And I'm definitely underutilizing Fire from a business account perspective. But no, been watching you guys as you've been growing, and it's really impressive to see. You mentioned a little bit about the concept of embedded finance. If you look ahead to the future, What are you most excited about with where fintech is headed?
I see the core clearing systems changing. So what we've been doing for many, many years in fintech and payments is we've been working on the outside of the onion, if you like, if you can describe the payments ecosystem as an onion, and we haven't really been changing the core, right? So
Yeah.
we've been making, processes better, card payments. But cards payment, ultimately, what does a card payment do? It moves money from one bank account to another, right? It's a layer that sits on top of the core clearing system. Open banking payments is another. And I think one of the most exciting things which is coming down the line for me is what I call scheme-based, account-to-account based payments. What I mean by that is that the core faster payment scheme in the UK or the core SEPA credit transfer scheme will itself open up to the possibility of more data flowing with the transactions. So instead of just your 18 character uppercase reference number, you're actually going to get a whole load of data, right, with those transactions. With that data, there comes much better security, much less fraud, and there comes the idea and the concept of instant payments and also what are called requests for payments. And the fact that we're seeing like there is a request to pay version 1, if you like, in the UK clearing today. Within 2 to 3 years, I sit on the what's called the Strategic Participant Group for Pay.UK for the new payments architecture in the UK, where I contribute, if you like, from a non-bank financial institution perspective. And I find that the core clearing systems are going to bring in a capability in the next 3 to 5 years, both the SEPA one and the UK one, and it will come right across the world, I think, and that those capabilities will enable like basically real-time, safe, secure, account-to-account based payments between people, between businesses, and between businesses and people. And that's going to be, a huge shift in the industry, and it's going to really change the way people pay and get. And everybody needs to be, if you're in payments, like you've got to keep 2 eyes on that development right now, not 1 eye, because it's so significant. I think hopefully I'll still be around. It's not tomorrow. I get that it's not tomorrow, but it is the technology and everything else, and we've been slowly working into this core. I'd accept a credit transfers at the moment take 4 to 5 business hours is nonsense, right? And the separate credit transfer instant payment is going to become mandated, I would think, within the next year. And I think all banks will be just told, you've got to join this. All account providers will be told they need to join it. And so, that will then become the norm in the same way as faster payments in the UK has been the norm. And what we're talking about now is no next generation faster payments, next generation separate credit transfer instant. And I think that's going to, it's a phenomenal change that will really change everything about payments.
I'm very excited about that as well. And especially as you mentioned that, the enhanced data that you can get with all of this. When you're talking about that, do you mean receipt data that will come with payments?
And if you think about what we do today, we have to do a lot of work to make sure that when people get paid, that we tell them who it is that's paid them and what it relates to and why. And a lot of that starts with the concept of the payment request, which is the ability for the person that wants to get paid to create a thing or an entity that allows them to say what this payment is about. So then when the payment is made, they can link back to that data and they can then tell people in an informed way. The technology can. And that is imminent, and we're already seeing it. And that's what we do actually in the open banking space today for some of our clients. We had the Irish Guide Dogs actually recently put up QR codes and some of their printed material, and they were using Fire for people to pay them directly from their accounts. So people didn't need a card to make a donation to them. They could just scan the QR code and open up whichever banking provider they have on their phone or account provider and make the payment directly from there. So yeah, I think the data is key to making all these transactions like really run smoothly. Now, it's also, I'm not saying, as I said, that this is going to take over tomorrow. What I'm seeing is that it's like, I was describing it to somebody this morning, like when we did credit card transactions first, we used the zip-zap machines with the piece of paper. That was the first iteration of credit cards, and then debit cards came out. And like, look at where they are today, and they evolved in my lifetime. Like they've evolved enormously to go completely digital. And I think account-to-account based payments will be the same. So the concept will remain. And what we're seeing now is the equivalent of the ZipZap machine. It's not great, but it's going to develop at a rapid pace, I think, in the next couple of years.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And a place where account-to-account payments are clearly live, but on a small scale compared to the global population right now, is in the crypto space. And, I think seeing what's happening with the likes of Visa connecting with stablecoin networks, I think that I'm very curious to see how this all bridges together. But I think this big change that you're talking about and the change to the whole payment value chain that will result from it will nicely tee things up for the fiat world and crypto world to join forces. So looking forward to that. On that note, I might have shared with you, Colm, that I'm leading the new Launchpool Web3 Techstars Accelerator here in Dublin. Really excited to be bringing Techstars to Ireland and also Launchpool, and looking for fantastic founders in the Web3 space. Agnostic of the space and agnostic of the focus of the accelerator. The mantra is founder first, and we focusing on fantastic founders and finding them. Any advice, one thing you would absolutely look for as a leading indicator of a fantastic founder for an early stage tech company? What might that be?
I can remember there was no accelerators or no kind of incubation kind of processes when we set up first 20 years ago. It wasn't like that.
Yeah.
I think they're a really, really important addition to the scene. I think that they are hugely instrumental, and they are a major catalyst, for helping some businesses get off the ground. I worry a little bit that they might be perceived as being the only way to do things. Mm-hmm. So I'm a huge fan of these programs. I think they're really, really important. And I think, I love when you say that it's founder first. I think that's really important to try and let the founders be the people that they are and that they want to be. If you look at the number of people that I know who are involved in startups in Ireland, that might be in food startup, in soft drinks, that might be in a whole range of different businesses, right? But they're not kind of seen as tech style businesses, right? And these are just as important, I think, to the economy going forward. And so it's kind of trying to marry up. I don't like the term, like I'm sure you feel probably the same one. Maybe you don't, but like things like unicorn and rock stars, and when people overuse these words, I don't think it does the industry any benefit, like when people overuse these words. I think we're looking for business people. We're looking for women and men who are maybe frustrated with what they've got, who want to work hard and are looking for an opportunity. And I very, very much see our role, certainly in the investments that we made, is simply just to help. Help those people, and that's all we try to do. And sometimes help is just speaking and talking and engaging and supporting and connecting, and yes, providing finance. And for us, we're kind of fortunate that we're in that position where we can provide that help. So I think, I love the startup scene, and I really think that programs, such as the Techstars, those accelerators, they're really, really important. I would have loved to have had them back in the day, and I didn't. And I know that when I did get some of that kind of talk over the years, I found it hugely beneficial in helping me to understand really what the challenges were. People will have ups and downs on the journey that they're going to go through, and we've got to make sure that they understand that the downs are normal as well. Do you know what I mean? That this is okay. And as John Tuning said to me many, many years ago, he said, failure is not a problem because it's just getting things wrong. Yeah, exactly. And you are speaking a lot of the Techstars story without knowing it right there, Colm. Okay.
So thank you. That's actually incredibly helpful. And I will say publicly that I'd love to give you a look inside of it when we get this going. It'd be great to have you come by and have a chat with the founders. We'll end up with 10 founders here in Dublin.
Good to see. Yeah.
Hopefully at least a couple of them Irish, if not more. And I'm a firm believer, like you said, in this multicultural diversity and the impact that it has on problem solving.
Yeah.
And coming at it from all walks of life. So I'm right there with you.
Yeah. The opportunity to be a leader in your own business is a fulfillment of a fantastic dream. And I wanted that always, and for no reason, like other than just I loved the idea of being in charge of my own organization and being the person that was going to direct the ship. I just knew I wanted to be in that position, and to have the opportunity to fulfill that dream, making it into 100 million, it's still a very successful outcome. And I think we need to celebrate, the smaller successes as much as we do the larger successes, because that's, I think, something that I think we miss sometimes, and I certainly am a huge fan of people, who have been successful, and successful though on what we might call, a relatively smaller scale. But I think that deserves as much, and sometimes even more success and more celebration is required for those successes than the big ones.
Exactly. No, I mean, success to me is non-monetary, and the measure of success and the scale of that is only based upon the perception of that success in your own mind. Right. Yeah. So I'm with you.
Yeah.
Last final question that we like to ask everybody on this podcast, Colm Lyon. Is there something that people wouldn't expect to know about you?
Wouldn't expect to know. I read a lot about ancient history, and specifically the antediluvian period.
Okay.
Which is a subject that I have found increasingly of great interest. I've been reading a lot of this over the last couple of years now about the many sites across the world which have been discovered only in the last 5 to 10 years, and still being discovered, in fact, which demonstrate clearly a very advanced civilization that existed in the world before the flood of whatever it was, 15,000 years ago. And how inexplicable it is that the buildings and the constructions and that the things that they did, and that we weren't hunter-gatherers back then, but we were actually far more advanced in our technology and in our ways of living than that which people suggested before.
Now you've piqued my interest. I'm a bit of a history geek myself, and I'm going to go dig into this.
Yeah.
Because I wasn't aware of that. You see some hints of it on flipping through Netflix documentaries with the kids, right?
But yeah.
Any book that you would suggest?
I would start
as
with
a primer.
There's Graham Hancock is the guy that I would suggest to start with. Graham Hancock is a UK based guy, and he has some amazing books where he shows the simple things like the Egyptian pyramids and the alignment of them is actually based on the constellation that would have been like thousands of years older than that which some people suggest the pyramids were built at. How the Sphinx, made out of limestone, has rain rivets in it from rainwater, but it hasn't rained in the desert for thousands of years. So right. how does the limestone have these? Also, you've got navigation that clearly existed as well at the time when Antarctica wasn't covered in ice, and the other things that we never learn in school, like there's just been 3 shifts of the polar regions have shifted like 3 times in 120,000 years, and the North Pole hasn't always been where it is today, and even within that short space of time, the world has changed dramatically. It's really enjoyable, I have to say to you, because it opens up your eyes, and you realize that, and somebody asked me recently, like, if I was going to bring in a subject into school, and they all thought I was going to say coding, and I said, no, I bring in archaeology, and let people learn about the history of the planet, because we've got a big problem right now with the planet. And one of the ways I think that we can go about solving it is to appreciate its fragility, and appreciate that it has in recent times even been subject to cataclysmic events that can just completely annihilate civilization, So to self-destruct it ourselves is nuts, right? When, we should be just, appreciating it as it is. So I think, I'm not sure what it's got to do with tech and payments, but
no. It's all perspective. It's all, taking the lessons learned of those that came before you, whether that was 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years ago, or 140,000 years ago. So awesome. Well, listen, this has been a far deeper chat than I had anticipated, and one that I thoroughly enjoyed, Colm. So thank you so much for coming on to the show. No,
thanks a million for having me on side, and best of luck with the TechStars Accelerator now. I hope that goes really well.
Thank you.
Great.
Talk to you soon.
Cheerio. Bye-bye.
That does it for this week, folks. A big thanks to Colm Lyon for opening up his mind to help us figure out why he does what he does. Links to learn more about Colm and Fire.com are in the show notes on our website at moneyneversleeps.ie, so check us out online. If you like what you heard, we would sincerely appreciate a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or whatever platform you're listening on, as it helps others to find the show. And remember, Money Never Sleeps is spelled as all one word. Also, thanks to Conan Brophy from Create Sound for mixing and editing this episode. Conan is an excellent media man to get in touch with when you're thinking about launching your own podcast. As for me, I'm an early stage startup advisor and investor, and I'm leading the Launchpool Web3 Techstars Accelerator here in Dublin, Ireland. As always, I help fintech and digital asset startups get their product to market, build traction with customers, and raise funding. If you'd like to get in touch, drop us a line on info@moneyneversleeps.ie. Finally, till next time, thanks for listening. See ya!
Money never sleeps, pal.